I should have never gone back to Blackwater Lake because everyone who ever fished there said the same thing once you cast your line. You're not alone anymore and something ancient starts watching you from the moment the hook touches the water. I thought it was just a scary tale meant to keep kids from wandering too far into the woods, but the night I went there with my 2 friends proved every rumor true in a way I wish I could erase from my mind. We reached the lake after sunset and the place looked wrong in a way that made the hair on my arms rise. The surface of the water was too dark to flat to still like a sheet of black glass, stretched across a mouth waiting to swallow anything that leaned too close. The air smelled heavy like wet metal and old bones, and the trees around us stood twisted, like they had been trying to crawl away from the lake and were frozen mid-escape. My friends joked about it, but their voices sounded too loud to shaky, like even the trees would hear them and answer. The moonlight barely touched the water, as if something beneath pushed it away. I stepped onto the old wooden dock and the boards groaned under my weight, like they were warning me to turn around. I told myself we would fish for an hour, catch something big and leave. But the moment I threw my line into the lake, I felt a pull inside my chest like a whisper, saying you should not have come here. The line sank into the dark water and the lake went silent in a way that felt unnatural, like all sound had been swallowed whole. My friend Jake laughed and asked if I was scared, but before I could answer, something tugged on my line. Not a small tug, not a normal fish tug, but a deep, powerful pull that made my knees buckle. I gripped the rod with both hands as the force yanked me forward so hard I nearly fell into the lake. Jake moved closer to help, but before he could touch the rod, the lake started to ripple in wide circles like something enormous was rising beneath the surface. I told Jake to step back, but he ignored me and leaned over the edge of the dock to try to see what was pulling the line. He whispered, "What the hell is that?" And right then something slammed against the underside of the dock, so hard the whole structure jumped. The boards cracked under our feet and Jake fell to his knees. I felt the rod nearly rip out of my hands and a cold rush of panic shot through my body. Whatever was down there was not a fish. It was not anything that belonged in water at all. The line jerked upward and for a moment I saw a pale shape under the surface, lit by the weak moonlight. It was long and thin, like a stretched human body with limbs that floated unnaturally in the dark water. It twisted slowly, turning its head toward us, and I swear I saw a face with no eyes, only hollow pits, that stared through the water straight at me. A low sound vibrated across the lake like a muffled scream rising from somewhere deep below. I dropped the rod and stumbled backward, but Jake grabbed the handle thinking he could reel it in. He shouted that he felt it weakening, that he could get it out of the water and prove we had caught something unbelievable. I tried to pull him away, but he refused to let go. The thing under the surface moved again, and the lake frothed with violent bubbles, like it was boiling from the inside. Then it rose closer and closer, and for the first time I saw its hand, a long skeletal hand, with fingers that bent too many times, reaching upward toward Jake. Before I could shout a warning, the water exploded. That pale hand shot up from below and wrapped around Jake's wrist. He screamed as the creature yanked him forward, with impossible strength dragging him toward the edge of the dock. I grabbed his other arm and pulled, but the creature was stronger. Jake's feet scraped against the boards as he slid closer to the water, his nails clawing into the wood, leaving deep scratches as he begged for help. The water around the creature churned and splashed, and something dark rose behind it, something bigger, much bigger. I saw a shape like a massive spine arching out of the water, then another, like a giant serpent made of human bones. The creature's eyeless face rose inches from Jake's, and it let out a sound so low and hateful it felt like it was vibrating inside my skull. Jake screamed again, but his voice cracked into silence as the creature's grip tightened. I pulled with everything I had, but the creature dragged him halfway off the dock. His legs kicked wildly, and his screams turned into choking gasps. The lake smelled like rot and wet earth and something older, something wrong. My other friend Mark ran over and grabbed Jake's shoulders, but even with both of us pulling, the creature was dragging him into the black water inch by inch. Jake's foot slipped between the boards and his body lurched forward. The creature's other hand surfaced and clamped onto his shirt, pulling him toward the open mouth of the lake. That was when the surface broke fully and I saw its full head, a stretched human face with skin too thin to tight over a skull like it had been drowned. For 100 years, water poured from its empty eye sockets as its jaw opened wide, showing rows of sharp, uneven teeth, dripping with black liquid. Jake screamed one last time and the creature yanked him downward into the water. With so much speed I nearly fell in with him. Mark and I hit the dock hard as Jake vanished below the surface, leaving only ripples that spread outward in perfect circles. The lake grew silent again instantly, eerily, unnaturally silent, as if Jake had never existed at all. Mark started crying, telling me we had to go in after him, but I grabbed him and told him if he jumped he would not come back. The lake was watching us. I could feel it. Something old, something hungry, something that knew we had seen its face. Mark backed away, shaking so hard he looked like he would collapse. I heard something beneath the dock shifting, moving, swimming in slow circles, like it was thinking, deciding whether it wanted more. The boards under our feet began to creak like something was pressing upward from below. I grabbed Mark's arm and yelled that we had to run now before the lake changed its mind. We sprinted off the dock through the dirt, and the trees and the branches whipped our faces as we stumbled in the dark. Behind us I heard a splash followed by a low dragging sound, like something pulling itself out of the lake and stepping onto the dock. I did not look back. I could not. I knew if I turned around I would see that eyeless face crawling toward us through the shadows. We reached the tree line, and just as we stepped into the thick woods we heard it. Jake's voice, soft, wet, calling our names from the direction of the lake. But it was wrong. Too slow. Too broken. Like something was using his voice to lure us back. Mark froze and started to turn, but I grabbed his shirt and yanked him forward, telling him it was not Jake. Jake was gone. The lake had taken him, and whatever was calling our names was something else entirely. We ran until the trees blurred together and the ground felt like it was tilting under our feet. My chest burned. My legs shook. My throat felt raw. But we did not stop, not once, because the voice kept following us, slipping between the trees, echoing off the night like a whisper crawling across the ground, trying to catch up. And that was only the first story, the first horror, the first nightmare waiting in the dark water. We did not stop running until we crashed out of the woods and stumbled onto the gravel road that cut through the forest like a scar. Mark collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold himself up. I stood there staring back into the darkness, because even though the trees looked silent, and still I felt something moving between them, something crawling just out of sight, watching us from the shadows. The wind had died completely. The night felt dead. Even the insects refused to make a sound, like every living thing in the forest was holding its breath. Mark whispered that he heard Jake again, but when I listened, the only thing I heard was the faint rustle of leaves deeper in the woods, and that was worse, because it sounded slow, deliberate, heavy, like footsteps that had never learned how to be human. I grabbed Mark by his shirt and pulled him up, telling him we needed to go toward the old ranger station by the cliff, because it had lights and a radio, and maybe that would be enough to keep whatever followed us from grabbing us the way it grabbed Jake. We began walking fast down the road, and every few seconds Mark would glance behind us like he expected Jake to stumble out of the woods, dripping lake water, with those pale hands reaching for us. I did not blame him. Every time I blinked I saw that eyeless face rising from the lake that stretched human skin. That old drowned looked like something that had been buried underwater for centuries. The voice that called us still echoed in my mind, echoing like it was inside me, not behind me. Halfway down the road Mark froze. He gripped my arm so tight I could feel his fingernails digging into my skin. He pointed at the edge of the forest where the trees were packed so close. They looked like one giant black wall. At first I saw nothing. Then something pale moved between the trunks, a head rising slowly from behind a fallen tree. A familiar head. Jake's head. His face looked wrong and swollen and stretched like he had been underwater for days. Even though only minutes had passed, His mouth hung open and black water poured out onto the dirt in thick streams. He took a step out of the trees, but his movements were slow, jerky, like he had forgotten how to use his own legs. His arms hung limp at his sides and his chest rose and fell in unnatural sharp motions, like something inside him was pumping air into lungs that no longer worked. Mark whispered his name and Jake's head snapped toward us with a crack so loud it echoed across the road. His neck bent in an angle no living person could survive and his empty eyes locked onto us. I grabbed Mark's wrist and pulled him backward, but Jake started walking toward us faster, dragging 1 foot behind him, like it did not belong to him anymore. His clothes dripped dark lake water onto the gravel, leaving a wet trail behind him. His mouth stretched wider, and a deep guttural breathing sound rumbled from his chest like something was trying to speak through him and failing. Mark shouted that we had to help him, but I could see clearly that Jake was not Jake anymore. The lake had taken him and returned what it wanted us to see. Something wearing him like a skin. Something that should have stayed beneath the water. Jake's walking turned into a run. A fast, unnatural run with limbs flailing in sharp, broken movements like he was being controlled by invisible strings pulled too tight. His footsteps slammed against the road and the sound echoed through the forest like a warning. Mark stood frozen, unable to move, but I shoved him hard and we both bolted down the road. Toward the ranger station. Behind us, Jake screamed. It was not a human scream. It was layered, deep, wet, like a drowning person crying underwater, while another voice shrieked through him at the same time. The sound chased us down the road, filling the air with something primal and ancient. That made my chest feel tight and my vision blur with fear. Ranger station came into view, a small wooden building perched near the cliff edge with a single weak light glowing above the door. We sprinted toward it and I slammed into the door so hard it shook on its hinges. Mark grabbed the handle and yanked it open and we stumbled inside, slamming the door behind us. Just as Jake reached the porch outside, the door rattled violently as Jake crashed against it. His hands slapped against the wood, leaving wet, dark prints that dripped down the surface. His distorted voice screamed our names again and again, stretching the syllables until they sounded like something tearing apart. Mark backed away, shouting that Jake was going to break through, but I grabbed a metal bar lying near the wall and jammed it under the door handle, locking it in place. Jake pounded against the door harder and harder. The wood began to splinter. His voice grew louder, more distorted. The walls seemed to shake with every impact. I backed away toward the radio on the desk and fumbled with the switch, hoping it still worked. The light flickered on and I grabbed the mic, shouting for help, telling them something was outside. Something was trying to break in, something that had taken our friend. Static filled the room. Then a voice crackled through. A slow, deep voice that sounded like it came from the bottom of the lake, not from any human throat. It whispered my name in a tone that made my skin crawl. I dropped the mic and the radio cut to silence instantly. Mark screamed and pointed at the window. Jake's swollen, dead face pressed against the glass. His eyes were gone, completely hollow, and black water dripped from the empty sockets. His mouth was stretched open so wide his jaw looked cracked. Then a pale hand rose behind him. A hand that was not his. A long, thin hand with far too many joints. It rested on Jake's shoulder and slowly pulled him backward into the darkness. Jake's face vanished. His body dragged away by something bigger, something moving with slow, confident strength. The window darkened. The pounding stopped. Silence swallowed the station again. Mark fell to his knees sobbing, and I stood there shaking, unable to breathe, because for a moment I thought we were safe, but the floorboards beneath my feet began to vibrate. A deep rumbling sound echoed through the station like something was crawling underneath us, moving from the direction of the lake up through the earth toward the cliff. The lights flickered. The walls groaned. The ground shook harder and harder like something was rising. I grabbed Mark and pulled him toward the back door, telling him we needed to run again, because the lake was not done with us, not even close. We burst through the rear door and ran toward the cliffside where old stone steps led downward, into another part of the forest. The wind finally returned, but it carried the smell of the lake with it, the smell of rot old water, and something ancient waking up. As we reached the steps, I heard a voice behind us. Jake's voice. But this time it was not broken. It was calm, clear, calling my name. When I turned, I saw him standing on the porch of the ranger station, dripping water, staring at us with a blank expression. Then he smiled. A wide, unnatural smile that told me the real Jake was gone forever. We ran into the darkness knowing the night had only just started and the lake wanted more.